I know what you're thinking, this can't be real, right? Did I actually enjoy Joker Folie 2? Let's find out.
Let me introduce you to the new Joker. Ah!
No! God, please, no! No!
No, I didn't enjoy it. But I have a reason why I decided to call this video exactly this way, and I will take you down a journey with me. First of all, we will probably start with some context. Why I like 2019's Joker, why I like the performance that was given by Joaquin Phoenix, why I like the fact that Todd Philips actually made this kind of movie, its social impact as well, its cultural impact as well, maybe on the Hollywood industry overall. Then I'm gonna go into my rant, because honestly, this video was not supposed to come out this week. I was not supposed to talk about Joker because I was expecting to love it, to be honest. It was such a weird idea, and every single video that I watched, I was sitting there being like, there is no way that this is gonna be bad. Oh boy, I've got news for you. This is really, really, really bad.
I'm a Joker and Jog is on you! Yeah!
And then we'll head into my argument on why I think that this is actually a story that completely makes sense, but I will explain why you're not satisfied with it, because I think it's really, really clear. Let's start by the context then. Joker 2019, we're exactly in the middle of superhero fatigue when it comes to the MCU, and especially when it comes to the DC universe. I don't remember exactly the dates when it comes to when Justice League came out, when Black Adam came out, but I'm pretty sure is like exactly in the middle of all of that. So we're sitting there being like, there is no way that this movie is gonna tell us something different, something interesting as well, because we've seen the character of the Joker being represented across so many different films, whether they are animated or whether they are TV shows, or whether they are whatever Jared Leto was doing in his performances for the movies that you probably don't want to remember, right?
You don't want to kill me. I'm your best friend.
All I'm trying to say is that we love the Joker, we love interpreting the Joker in so many different ways, and we like to give it kind of like new readings as well. Because if you look at Heath Ledger's Joker, I'm pretty sure that he perfectly embodies the fears, for example, that were originated because of 9/11, the idea of terrorism being completely nihilistic, and the idea of like destroying communities just for the sake of it, not specifically because you have any kind of ideals. That is what the Joker symbolized, for example, in the Dark Knight trilogy. And I'm sitting there being like, what is Joker about? Todd Philips' Joker. I loved it mostly because, well, practical reasons, really good cinematography, really impeccable score. I also think that when you look at the script, it's very tight. They're not trying to do anything crazy with it as well. They're kind of like giving you breadcrumbs of what you know about the Joker's origin story without like going through the machinations. If you think about, for example, Batman's origin story with his parents getting killed, we don't really get that with the Joker. Until the very end of this film, I feel like you don't really know exactly who this Joker is supposed to be and what he's gonna become within a Batman cinematic universe as well. And that's what's exciting about it, in my opinion. What I loved about it, though, was its treatment of mental illnesses and the idea that even though it's taking place, I think, approximately in the 80s or something like that, basically when the movies that inspired it came out, so King of Comedy, but also Taxi Driver, it still resonated quite a lot with what is going on nowadays, especially if you look at social justice warriors, or even the idea of like people getting really angry online for no reason, and kind of like that loss of humanity that we all go through, whether you sit on the left or the right side of the spectrum. We don't really see each other as people anymore. We just see each other as political beliefs, as any kind of gender that you would like to ascribe to. And I feel like this movie was exactly talking about that kind of stuff. There are a lot of people who like really got into the Joker specifically because of the incel agenda, the idea of like giving power to someone who is kind of like looked down by society. But what I loved about it, once again, it's the mental health treatment idea. It's the idea of feeling like you're being left out in society. And this is not only to do with men. I'm pretty sure there are a lot of women who like Joker. It's just that they're not as vocal, mostly because, well, toxic cinephiles are gonna be like, you're not allowed to like Joker because you cannot understand it, because only men can understand the Joker, because we're nihilistic and dark and primal creatures or whatever the fuck. But I'm pretty sure there are a lot of women who identify with him as well. Specifically this new type of Joker who has like quite a lot of talks, basically, who could be on the spectrum as well, who definitely has been through a lot of trauma, and that trauma actually you can see it like on screen, what it has done to his body, what it has done to his mental health as well. And Joaquin Phoenix is incredible in the performance. Like every single time that he has that manic laugh, it's incredible, because this movie could have been so laughable, so pathetic as well, but he sells it to you. You really believe that this guy is suffering through this, and that he's basically built his entire life around his dream of being a comedian, and while he's being kicked down by everyone, he always tries to keep basically a smile on his face. And I love the idea of him basically not getting the therapy that he deserves, no one listening to him, and this is something that happens quite a lot within the mental health community. Basically, like, think about all your friends who suffer from mental illnesses, whether they are high functioning or low functioning people in society. Very often, like, it takes so much time to get your diagnosis, it takes so much time to get a treatment that actually works for you, that makes you feel like you're a normal person, and most of the time you actually never get that. There are so many people who, unfortunately, they cannot cope with the world as it is today because of their mental illness, and they end up like taking their lives, they end up taking other people's lives as well. And I was sitting there being like, Joker is a really good story when it comes to talking about those topics. And also, it's a story that empowers people like that who feel left out, people who basically do not have any kind of power over their body or their own stability, and they kind of decide to say fuck it. They kind of like sitting there being like, I'm tired of pretending that I'm a normal person, I'm tired of basically having to lie to everyone so that you feel comfortable around me. There is this entire idea of we're being really open about mental health awareness, but at the same time, if you have very visible instabilities, then you need to hide them. And that's something that the Joker like talks about quite a lot, because he has a lot of talks basically that come out, he cannot help himself, and at the end of the day, people will just stop living their lives and be weirded out by whatever he's doing. And society doesn't like that, like capitalist society in particular, because it needs to keep going, it needs to be as smooth as possible, people need to go back to work and live their lives. And this is what really resonated with me when it comes to Joker, that idea of kind of like wanting to destroy how society is structured, and specifically the kind of society that breaks down people from a physical perspective, from an economic perspective, or even from a political perspective as well. Then there are a lot of people who identified more as incels, as in people who are being left out because of the feminist movement and all of those types of conversations. That is also fair if you like to identify like that with that film, but that's not how I identified with it. So now do you understand why I liked Joker? Let's head into the second movie. I could talk about this forever, and usually when I critique movies, I try to look at the script, or I try to look at the character by character basis. Specifically when it comes to the series, I feel like that's very useful. Honestly, the best way of talking about the Joker is going through a chronological order and kind of like trying to understand why this doesn't work at all. And specifically when you're trying to identify with Arthur Fleck, and when you're trying to give him either a redemption arc, or you're trying to make him, well, be more stable, get better. This movie is not about that at all, and that's what really almost sickened me. I feel like I agree with what critics are saying right now and what people are saying right now as well on Letterboxd, that this movie was kind of like not made for anyone. It really feels like Todd Philips came out and was really angry about the critics and basically the general reception of this movie, where people got really angry at him because of how certain people decided to interpret it, and how people felt scared that some people were going to be radicalized by this movie and like become anarchic terrorists or whatever. And he decided to be like, you know what, I'm gonna make a second movie to punish all of the people who enjoyed Joker so that you cannot come back at me. It really felt like he wanted to destroy the legacy of his first film, and it was really, really sad. Let's start with the beginning of this film. This film starts in a really, really weird way with a Looney Tunes kind of cartoon interpretation of what happened in the previous film. I thought it was really, really strong, and I thought it was quite fun as well for the Joker to be introduced for a second time like this. But it introduces themes that have nothing to do with what we're talking about in the film, and it's things that are mostly hinted at. Basically, the entire argument of this film and the defense of the Joker, it's that he's got split personality disorder, and the Joker is the persona that basically manifests itself when Arthur Fleck felt either traumatized or attacked or whatever. It kind of sounds like one of those made-up things that attorneys would come up with to kind of like defend the undefendable. Like when you look at serial killers, for example, on Netflix, that kind of stuff, right? Mostly because if you look at Arthur Fleck's personality, which we know really well because we spent the entire first movie with him, of course there is a lot of trauma, but there is no split personality going on. You could really tell that the entire first movie was about him kind of like finding himself and basically like realizing that his persona, so the clown itself and him, were the same person. That he could basically find a way of making people laugh while also not be traumatized, while also not be attacked, while also not being abused as Arthur Fleck or even as the clown. Because I remember there is a specific scene where he's in his clown costume and he's being, I think, mocked by a couple of kids, for example, who steal something from him, and he's being kicked around as well. Just to say that when basically his life is split in between his work life, what he wants to do, being a comedian, and his Arthur Fleck like persona of him basically once again being kind of like an introvert, living with his mother, not having any friends, when those two things are apart, well, he's not happy basically, and he's not able to have any control over anything. So for me, the entire first movie was about him recognizing that part of himself and kind of like becoming a real person. I feel like the first film has perfect pacing. I've watched it 2 or maybe 3 times, and every single time that I watch it, I'm like, this is flowing so well. And all of those moments where basically he's like dancing and expressing himself, you could really feel that this movie is like heading towards a big break at the end. And this is not something we can tell about Joker Folie à Deux, which kind of like feels like it's a lot of sequences put together one after the other, a lot of ideas jumbled together, a lot of different films jumbled together, until at the end of the day it really stops and goes, stops and goes, stops and goes, and we're never satisfied with anything that we were watching. The way they introduced the musical part of this movie was actually quite clever, the idea of doing musical therapy, but once again we're not exploring it enough. I feel like the idea of doing like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest was really good. So the idea of being in the point of view of someone who we know that he doesn't belong in a place like Arkham, because Arkham is like disgusting, and we still want him to get better, but he doesn't know that he wants to get better. Like he basically needs to go through his own journey of accepting himself, and this entire movie felt like he needed to rediscover the character of the Joker within himself and become the Joker. So this is basically why a lot of people keep using this argument that the first movie and the second movie are kind of like the same thing, but I completely disagree. First of all, because in this movie you could tell that Harley Quinn is actually manipulating Arthur Fleck into becoming the Joker once again, but also we don't understand like the bridge in between the first movie and the second movie, as in by the end of the first movie he is at Arkham and you could really tell that he owns himself, as in he has control over his life for the first time ever. When did he break? When did he become Arthur Fleck again? When did he lose control over his life? And why did he even need to get manipulated by Harley to become Joker again, even though he didn't need anyone besides the abusers that he encountered in the first movie to become the Joker in the first place? So I was sitting there being like, this doesn't make sense. So basically you're putting a character up here when it comes to his character arc, and then in between movies you're kind of like resetting him so that we can bring him up here again, but we never actually go there. We go up and down, up and down, up and down. It really feels like Joaquin is actually performing in this movie. There is even a weird moment in the car, for example, where it really feels like basically he's heading to his trial and he's in the police car and he starts like maniacally laughing, but you can tell that it's not real. Like you can tell that he's almost faking it, and I was sitting there being like, what are you actually trying to imply in this movie? And that is one of the most negative messages that this film could have, while also destroying the legacy of the first film, because this movie actually entertains the argument for a little while that Arthur Fleck is actually faking his mental illness, and we don't really know why, because very often people fake mental illness because I don't know, they want fame or they want to access something. But even people who manage to fake mental illnesses really well, there is still something wrong with them, I think, just because there is no way that you could do it convincingly if you don't have anything else underneath, being for example a perverse narcissist or something like that. And I hated that. I hated the fact that this movie actually entertained the idea that Arthur Fleck not only didn't have any kind of mental illness at all, and he didn't have any grasp of it as well, but also that he was actually faking it and he was pretending to be someone that he wasn't, which we knew that it was not true because we watched the entire first movie where actually he started to assert himself as the Joker, which actually healed him in some kind of like fucked up way. We all have to agree about that, of course. Basically, he meets Harley in Arkham Asylum. He would get kind of a glimpse of hope where Arthur kind of like doesn't feel alone anymore. He is also has this weird kind of like buddyship, friendship. We cannot really call it a friendship at the end of the day. Companionship maybe with one of the guards who is weirdly really nice to him, even though he's still treating them like a patient most of the time and he's giving him privileges. The thing that I don't like about Harley is that basically she's not really the main character of this movie at the same time as the Joker is. She's coming in and out of Joker's life and she's not really giving us anything, and I really didn't like that much the musical moments, mostly because it should have been way weirder. This should have been kind of like Who Framed Roger Rabbit, where the movie goes completely insane. Plus, it is really clear that at the beginning of the movie, Arthur Fleck is like completely toned down. He doesn't have any energy anymore, and that is mostly because of the medication that they're giving to him. At least that's my interpretation. I'm pretty sure that's obvious, right? So wouldn't it be really interesting, of course, to see that represented in the musical numbers as well, to see his like fantasies really weird, almost like he was on drugs and seeing things that weren't really there. I don't know, it really felt like you've got a character like the Joker, you've got an introduction which looks like a weird Looney Tunes movie, and then most of the musical numbers, if you look back on them, they're just basically different kind of jazzy La La Land like interpretations of what they want to do. There is nothing that iconic when I think about it. There is only like one scene which I really liked, it's the one at the trial, but even now that I think about it, there are so many moments which could have been so interesting if you made other people sing and not just Joker and Harley. What if at the trial, for example, people started singing like their testimonies and stuff like that, because basically Arthur Fleck was so completely bored for the trial that he just started imagining that people would sing their testimonies, would sing awful things to him and reveal secrets about him as well, about his mother and about the things that they went through together while singing about them and dancing around. That would have been so incredibly funny, but like in a really dark humor kind of way. This is the thing that makes me hate this movie as well. It feels like wasted potential. It really feels like wasted potential, and it's a real shame. There is a lot of budget here, you can tell. The cinematography once again looks amazing, and I feel like the soundtrack is quite good, even though it is mixing a lot of songs that we already know. And I've actually heard that most of the musical numbers that we hear here, they're actually taking the lyrics from songs of that time as well, from the 60s and 70s and 80s. I didn't recognize the song, so I was sitting there being like, whoa, if this is actual original music, this is quite good. But if it's not original music, then it's kind of weird. Like if you actually recognize songs that you've heard before. I've heard other critics, for example, saying how certain lyrics didn't match almost at all exactly what was going on with the Joker's life. I also really like the fact that Arthur Fleck himself loves movies so much and he loves musicals, so it makes even more sense that he would create these kind of fantastical fantasies so that he could basically feel like a normal person as well, because his life is so miserable. It makes sense that you're basically losing yourself within these kind of delusions so that you feel something. Let's talk about the guard thing. There is this moment, for example, when he comes back from the trial where he's at this moment representing himself and he gets sexually abused. And my theory is that he's been getting sexually abused for a really long time, and maybe that's why his Joker persona like disappeared for some reason, even though it doesn't even make sense, because if you look at the first movie, the Joker persona became even more powerful when he was getting abused so that he could basically find a way to survive all of it, right? So it makes sense, but it also doesn't make sense. But it makes sense if you think about why the guard is actually so nice to Arthur Fleck since the very beginning. So if you think about this, right, for the entire movie, every single time that basically this guard is being nice to him, he's basically giving him privileges so that he doesn't talk about the fact that he's being sexually abused by him. It's completely fucked up, right?
You disgust me. Go on.
There is only one scene which confirms that this actually happens, but there is no way that this is the first time that it happens. I cannot believe it. Also because the guards around him, they know exactly what they're supposed to do, like to keep him down and to take off his clothes and stuff like that. There is no way that the other guards would have not hesitated a little bit if this was the first time. So my theory is that it's been happening for a while, and this theory fucks up with the movie even more, because not only you've got a person who has a really severe mental illness and clearly is not getting the support that he needs, you're also abusing him, and you're introducing this theme almost in the third act, and you also don't address it at all. And this is also the moment where basically the Joker persona kind of disappears all of a sudden, and the movie ends basically where Joker goes to his trial, and he basically agrees with his lawyer that the Joker didn't ever exist, and that he's just basically a pathetic person who ended up having a nervous breakdown and killed some people. And he kind of tears up and he starts crying. And there is this moment also when basically they announce the verdict and he almost cannot believe it, which is weird. Once again, that is weird. This is the thing that I don't like about this film. There are so many inconsistencies. For example, if you're actually confessing to everything, then you would accept the verdict even more and be like, I mean, I deserve this because you're accepting reality for the first time. You're not living in a fantasy anymore. And the entire idea of Harley Quinn kind of being disappointed by him, not wanting to commit to being the Joker basically, it's weird. I feel like Harley Quinn, the one that we know, would have actually tried to manipulate him even more to become the Joker once again, because it probably would have worked. And there is this moment which I actually like when he's kind of finally gotten back to reality and he's asking her not to sing anymore, but Harley Quinn is completely lost in her fantasy and she wants to live through it. And that was a really, really good moment. But most of the moments that they share together, they don't really ring true just because they don't spend enough time together. I feel like either the entire movie takes place at Arkham Asylum, they get to know each other, somehow they sneak together so that they can meet, and then the movie ends with them escaping Arkham basically, and him having fully accepted the Joker persona so that he can not only be violent but also manipulate people, even people who think and they know that he's actually a bit weird and that he's violent. That would have been really, really cool. It would have been actually incredible if Harley ends up creating part of the Joker that we know by helping Arthur Fleck deal with his mental instabilities. That would have been incredible. Or you do a completely different movie, The Trial of the Joker, which would have been incredible, and then you have an entire movie where basically he fires his lawyer and he represents himself, and he represents himself either doing incredibly weird bits of comedy, musical numbers as well if you want. Anything can happen at this point, and you want him to be clever. There is a really cool moment in this movie where basically he's talking to Gary, and I was sitting there and be like, why, since you're actually asking questions to this guy, why don't you ask him, why are you here today? And he would have been like, because I want to testify against you because you killed my friend and you traumatized me and everything. And he could have pushed it and be like, no, why are you here today? You're here today because I decided not to kill you, because I spared your life. Aren't you grateful a little bit? And then you have that kind of dark, sadistic thing of being like, you testifying against someone who could have killed you and decided not to kill you. It would have been so much more interesting. And then this is my main argument of basically why I didn't like this film. Arthur Fleck is incredibly stupid in this film, and they made him into the most stupid person ever. They really basically turned the tables upside down, and Todd Philips really wanted to shit on everyone, on the fans of this movie, on the fans of the Joker lore as well, just by basically showing how Arthur Fleck is the most pathetic person ever, and you don't really need to root for him, and you don't really need to believe in him at all, because look at him, he's completely insane. He's acting insane, and he lives in a fantasy world, and he probably deserves to go on the electric chair. This really made me feel sad. This entire movie made me feel so sad because they kind of ruined the character of Arthur Fleck on purpose, or at least they made it less sensational, to the point that he becomes a normal person, and you're sitting there being like, why is this even a Joker movie at this point? Why are we calling this the Joker if it doesn't commit to telling a Joker story? The first movie, you could argue that maybe they were playing playing with the definition of what it means to be the Joker, and they're trying to do something different. Anybody can be the Joker, and anyone can have a bad day and become the Joker. And then you head into this film and they're like, actually no, this guy is not the Joker. Yeah, I said anyone could be the Joker. It could be that random guy sitting at the back of the room that you saw so often because there are shots of his face coming over and over again. And I mean, spoiler alert in case you haven't seen it, this guy who basically is just sitting there in the background while the Joker is dying in the foreground, and he cuts his face open and we realize that that is the Joker, that he's gonna become the Joker that we know within the cinematic universe. And this really sucks. This reminds me of Gotham. Not Gotham the city, Gotham the TV show, which is one of the most disgusting adaptations ever. Probably even worse than like all of the Flash and Arrow, Supergirl, Legends of Tomorrow all combined. They wouldn't make something as bad as Gotham, just saying. And this is what the final message of the movie is, just to tell you, Todd Philips is like, look, we destroyed Arthur Fleck, he's a pathetic piece of shit, and now you actually have the real Joker right there. And I hated that, and you know why? Because of the context that I told you before, right? Why I identified with this character and why I thought it was a really interesting way of reinterpreting the Joker and what he stands for as well. But I feel like this movie would have been so much better if it was way more violent. If, for example, some of the fantasies weren't only musical numbers, but if it was also randomly killing people. Because I feel like the most powerful moments of this film were still the musical numbers, which ended up becoming violent. And that kind of dichotomy and that kind of difference in tone, that's what worked the best. I'm talking way too much about this film, so let's head into my main argument on why I think that still it works as a story. Because first of all, Todd Philips wrote both of the scripts with the help of another writer, so we can't even say that the first film was written by someone else and the second film was not. I feel like if you put all of the scripts together, you actually get a full interesting journey for Arthur Fleck. It's just that it's not the journey that we're meant to see. I feel like this is the kind of story that will work way better in a narrative format, maybe as a book or even as a graphic novel as well. But when we're watching films, and especially when they ask you to identify with a specific character, even if it's a tragedy, even if we know that it's going to end badly, think about Romeo and Juliet, for example, or so many other plays. Greek plays, for example, are a really good example. You know it's going to end badly, but you still love these characters, but you expect it, you know? I feel like the pathos is so strong, the pacing is so strong that you know that there is no way that this story can end positively. And we didn't really feel that with Joker Folie à Deux. There is even like in the third act a moment where they blow up the entire like tribunal and he manages to escape and he's saved by some of the basically people who are dressed like him, and that moment actually doesn't really come back at all. That moment like leads to still him going back to Arkham Asylum, and it kind of feels like he was having like a weird manic episode because nothing seems to have changed. We don't really know whether he's gonna get the electric chair, when he's gonna get it. We know that he's been found guilty, but we don't really know what the consequences are. And the main problem is that this movie like is so badly written because even the trial moments, they're so condescending, they're so incredibly simplistic. It's just a back and forth in between the defense attorney asking questions that we already know the answer to. There are not that many revelations, there are not many plot twists. It really feels like this movie is just there for the theme of delivering us a pathetic Arthur Fleck. So if the first movie was about kind of like building up Arthur Fleck, the second movie is about revealing the fact that if you actually glorify someone, you can't really realize all of his flaws. And I feel like this movie and this story shows how Arthur Fleck has never been a really clever person. You could really tell, for example, in the trial scenes where he's trying to find any kind of argument and he's trying to ask questions like to people as well, but he's going in circles. It's not funny, it's not compelling. Basically, the entire point of the story is to make him look pathetic, yes, but also to show us how he's always been that way, and it just shows how everyone else basically like glorified him so much in the first movie that he seemed kind of like bigger than life. But he actually isn't bigger than life. He has a lot of mental health problems and he doesn't have a hold on any of them. He's easily manipulated by other people as well, whether they have power over him or not, or whether they pretend to be in love with him. So this is a nihilist kind of story when you think about it, and the entire first movie was also a nihilist story, but it worked in the favor of Arthur Fleck / the Joker, to the point that even though he got in Arkham, you could feel that he felt well there. He was really where he belonged. And then we head into this movie and you really feel like they're trying to deconstruct that completely and to give some kind of resolution to Arthur Fleck. There is some kind of like exploration of the trauma that he suffered with his mother. He actually confesses to killing her, like at the trial itself. So you could really tell that this movie was about basically revealing a completely human portrait of Arthur Fleck. But this is not why we go to the movies though, right? I mean, this is something that would have worked maybe if this was the third act of the Joker itself. But as a movie overall, it just doesn't work. It just doesn't work because we're not used to feeling like that. We're not used to building characters up and destroying them so much to the point that you're not rooting for anyone. You're not rooting for the justice system in this movie. You're not rooting for the rioters either, because you know that it's completely empty. They don't really believe in anything. They just believe in destroying things and taking advantage of the situation to be violent. You don't really like support the Arkham Asylum or even any kind of structure that is trying to take care of mental health. You don't really support the new Joker because he's been introduced in like one final scene at the very end of the movie. You don't support Harley Quinn because you don't really feel like you understand her at all, because she doesn't spend that much time in Arkham, and it's really weird actually. You don't really know what kind of message you're supposed to take from this film, and I feel like there are so many things that are being like introduced and you don't really know what to do with them. And this is why most people I think had a really bad time and they really can't put like a pin on it. They don't really understand exactly why they had a bad time. But my take is that the story of Arthur Fleck in the way that it was told is just a story that is not entertaining to watch, especially if you put the first film and the second movie together. I think it is an interesting story for Arthur Fleck, especially if you deconstruct it, especially if you analyze why we fall in love with certain characters, especially if they have certain negative like connotations, they are villains slash anti-heroes, and why basically we turn like against them as soon as basically they start getting better. We could actually compare this film to Dexter, and how the more you keep going with the seasons, the less you're actually interested in what Dexter is doing, because he's trying to get better, he's trying to understand himself to the point that he will stop killing people. And it's weird because you didn't connect with him because you wanted him to get better. You're still rooting for him to get better, but at the same time, this is not the reason why you're watching this film. And that is the problem. I feel like this is a Joker movie that doesn't want to be a Joker movie. This is a Joker movie that wants to end it.
Bang!
They want you to keep going with your life so that you forget about it and you go back to something more interesting or whatever. You could really feel the contempt that Todd Philips has for this character here, in contrast with the first film where he clearly showed way more interest in him. But anyways, this is all I had to say when it comes to the Joker. I feel like I could keep going for ages, but it would be too long to edit, so I need to go. But anyways, here down at the bottom you will be able to find other videos of me talking about mostly the DC universe, for example, and here at the top I'm gonna show you what I'm talking about in the next few weeks as well. I hope you enjoyed this video, and don't forget to smash that like button. Every single time that you do that, you create another Joker which inspired another Joker which inspired another Joker in Arkham Asylum or in real life or whatever.
Can I count on you?
As long as Todd Philips doesn't get to destroy the legacy of the first film anymore, I'm happy. If there is a third one coming out, I'm not gonna watch it, because honestly this kind of left a bitter taste in my mouth. I was sitting there being like, I literally wasted time. Honestly, this film made me more angry than mediocre things like Black Adam or Justice League as well. To be honest, I got quite angry at Justice League, so that's not a good example. But things like Shazam 2 Fury of the Gods, I feel like Joker 2, just because there are so many more interesting things to talk about, it makes me even more mad than Shazam 2 Fury of the Gods, which I will forget at some point, but I will not forget how angry I was at Joker 2 for a really long time. And I hope you don't as well. Let me know down in the comments what you thought of all of this. In the meantime, I'm Patrick, and this is Torn Apart.
Back in the 90s, I was in a very famous TV show.
Enjoy life.
Da 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 da. Da 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 da. Da 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 da.